And I'm 30 years old today, so you could say I'm thoroughly invested. Uh, one of my first jobs was doing loss prevention, which is making sure people aren't taking items from the store, so you're not shoplifting. And so I was very familiar with using handcuffs. But then I graduated and just had more interest, and I came into another company, and the CEO happened to be Jewish. And so this is how I first got the job at Leo Beck, and I started working at a school, which is how I met Mrs. Thompson. My journey with the Jewish people began long before that. My grandparents have both been to Jerusalem 3 times. My grandfather was baptized in the Jordan River. So there's a long-standing connection between the Jewish community and myself, long before I even knew what made sense to me. And so my path and journey at Leo Beck allowed me to explore that and meet a lot of great people and make a lot of great connections and do a lot of learning for myself, just to find out what the experience was for the Jewish community, because I can say that we have similar walks or a similar experience, shall we say, of oppression or being discriminated against. So yeah, that's pretty much my journey into how that began. And like I said, I met a lot of great people. I'm still very much thoroughly in the Jewish community, not so much at that school, but in different aspects, and have a longing to go to Israel. That being said, just here talking about the events that have happened currently in the world, and I can say that it took me a few days to process what had happened. It was a traumatic event. Watching someone pass away on camera isn't a traumatic event, and you should talk about it, regardless if it's someone of color. But it just happened to be someone that was Black, and you should talk about it. And I'm glad that Mrs. Thompson has asked me to come and speak about it. And what I wanted to start with is to start with a story that's more relatable to your age group. And it's not recent, but it's about a young man who was returning to his home. Don't know if anyone's heard of Trayvon Martin. And he was a young man that was murdered in 2012. And I'm just going to read a news article, and it's on history.com. On February 12, 2012, Trayvon Martin, an African-American teen, walking home from a trip to a convenience store, is fatally shot by George Zimmerman, a neighborhood watch volunteer patrolling the townhouse community of the Retreat at Twin Lakes in Sanford, Florida. Zimmerman later claimed to have shot the unarmed 17-year-old out of self-defense during a physical altercation. After police initially opted not to arrest Zimmerman, whose father is white and mother is Hispanic, the case sparked protests and ignited national debates about racial profiling and self-defense laws. Zimmerman later was charged with second-degree murder following a high-profile trial that riveted America. He was acquitted of the charges against him. So on the same day, Martin, he was visiting his father, who was separated from his mother. He was dressed in a hooded sweatshirt. The teen was on his way back to his home of his father's fiancée after buying a bag of Skittles and a bottle of juice when he was spotted by Zimmerman, a 20-year-old insurance fraud investigator who was captain of the neighborhood patrol at the Retreat at Twin Lakes, which recently had experienced a series of break-ins and burglaries. Zimmerman called the non-emergency line of the Sanford police to report that Martin looked suspicious, then ignored a police dispatcher's advice not to follow the young man. Moments later, gunfire rang out. When officers arrived, Martin was dead at the scene. Zimmerman, who had a bloody nose and cuts on the back of his head, was questioned, and then released. There were no eyewitnesses to the shooting, and the police chose not to arrest Zimmerman, who claimed to have acted in self-defense. That's just part of the article. It's not the full article, but it's the culture of just being able to see someone and identifying by their skin and thinking that they fit a profile. And he was a young man who was unarmed and just went to the store to go get Skittles and a bottle of water, or a bottle of juice, sorry. And many times I can say that I've gone to the store and, you know, I have to think about what I'm doing, or think about what I'm doing in the store, because I know the person in the store, the people in the store are going to be watching me extra, because there's a stereotype that I'm going to take something, and that's just based on how I look. And I can say that I've experienced that many times, and that's me not wearing my uniform. That's one experience that I can say that I've had. Another reason I got into the uniform is to be on the other side and say, hey, you know, I'm here to help. I'm here to aid. I'm not here to do all these things that this stereotype might have surrounded about it. I wake up every day and I make sure that when I am in uniform, or regardless if I'm not in uniform, that I carry myself different, because I want to make sure that if someone that isn't Black or isn't of the same color as me, when they have an interaction with me, it can maybe change that stereotype and change how you view the people that might have my skin color. Because I want you to have an experience and know that not everyone is grouped under a stereotype, and not everyone of the same color might be a criminal or might be taking something. Because I can tell you that's the general census. The first time I experienced racism was probably in grade 4. Yeah, I was 9 years old, and I shared the school with, I was at a public school, and we shared the school with a Catholic school, and I had one of the children, we had played soccer, baseball against each other, and because they lost, and I hit the last home run before recess was over, he decided to call me something defaming. I won't repeat it because it's not worth repeating, and it's not something that I want to share with you. But it was, he said something defaming of my skin. He said black and then explicit, and that was the first time I ever got upset. That was the first time I ever felt the rage that I recently felt in the last few days about the killing of George Floyd. It's not a good feeling, and I knew it wasn't a good feeling when I first had it, and it wasn't something that I wanted to repeat. So, which is why I decided to carry myself differently from that day on. And then I'll bring it more forward to a more recent experience. As I was traveling in Hong Kong, I was with a friend, and we swapped every airport that we went to. We swapped on who was pushing the bags, and it happened to my turn to be pushing the bags to the hotel. And I was 10 feet ahead of her, and my friend is white. Like, well, she's European white, but you'd guess her for different nationalities if you did see her. But her first appearance is white, and she was 10 feet behind me. I pushed my cart into the hotel lobby, and all of the attendants pretty much looked at me and just didn't really pay attention. And then the moment my friend joined me, they were like, "Hi, Miss." They like instantly propped up and were like, "Hi, Miss. How may I help you? You're staying at our hotel?" And then she looked at me, and I looked at her, and that's when she realized that I had just been stereotyped. And I just stood there. And most of the time when you see something like that, the person that is Black will probably freeze, because you have to, like I said, I try to be different. You have to not react, you have to respond. And that's a hard thing to do when someone's judged you that way. Sorry. So she saw that happen. I froze because I didn't want to overreact. Let's say that. Because the moment you overreact, you become this angry person. And why are you overreacting? And again, it's another stereotype, an angry Black woman. But when you face things like that daily, you can only take so much. And sometimes you might reach that breaking point, and you will get that reaction. I like to carry myself different and take a moment and realize that this person's ignorance might not be their fault. This person's ignorance might be the way they were brought up. And I have to take that moment and be the bigger person. And I have to recognize that not everyone is operating on the same level of consciousness. And that's sometimes not the easiest thing. And sometimes people of my skin color or any other minority might not have that level of consciousness to be like, okay, you can't react. You have to educate instead. You have to turn the other cheek. You have to show them a different way. And if sometimes people are open to that and sometimes people are not. And all you can do is be that person, to be the beacon, to show them a different way. So some of the ways, I was listening to a few videos on social media platforms, and one of the things that really stood out was leaders show up even when they don't want to and deliver the messages people need to hear. And I can tell you that Mrs. Thompson asked me to be here, and I truly didn't know where to begin. And I didn't even write anything. I just wanted to say something from the heart. And another thing that really stuck out was authenticity matters. And because I carry myself and want to be seen as a leader, regardless of my skin color, and because I like to speak to youth, and because working at Leo Beck made me fall in love with working with youth, and because this opportunity was presented to me, there was no way I could say no. It's my responsibility to speak to youth on any topic. I know that that's my calling, and this just so happens to be on a topic that I am very, very familiar with. And yeah, I just wanted to share a piece of my experience. I didn't really mean to tear up on camera. That was not planned, but speaking from the heart allowed those feelings to come forward. Moving forward, I want to just be able to help help us in this fight. So some things I wrote down were reading more. One of my friends, actually, she's Filipino. Let me start with that. She's Filipino, and she put up a story on her social media. Some of you might not have social media yet, and that's okay. But she put up she's a mom, and she has 3 kids, and she put up on her social media on how you can diversify and how you can help the next generation so that this isn't really an issue. Because really it starts at home, or it starts as maybe a joke, or just not having the diversification that there is. Because I can tell you that I love going to Indigo, and there's not a lot of books in Indigo with people of my skin color. I have to go to a different bookstore to go and read about someone of my color. So something you can do is research different books that you can read with diverse characters. And Mrs. Thompson's already told me that your librarian has been posting a lot of different things on Twitter and a lot of different things on the social media platforms that your school has, that you can go and see different authors or different books that are of your reading level to be able to be relatable and or of modern day. Another way that you can help is the way I'm a world traveler, and usually how it starts is I'll start with trying the cuisine of that country, and then from the cuisine I'll just go into the language, and then from the language, and then it generates into a trip somehow. But trying different cuisines from different countries that are Black. I myself am Caribbean, so I'm sure some of you might have been to Jamaica or tried some sort of Caribbean food in some way. It's delicious. I can say that I love my hamantash myself. You can research Black-owned businesses, so different clothing stores, or some of the music that you listen to are probably some Black artists. You can go into a different genre to see what other genres Black artists are in. There are a few clothing stores. I know a few people that do make clothing, and they're actually pretty hip and modern, and some are actually old school, but just wearing or showcasing different brands that you like. Someone that's maybe a gamer on YouTube, and he has a business, and you see that he gives you some cheat codes or something. But just being able to see and get different views of the world, and not just Black people, but from different countries. You should just diversify your view. That would be my general advice to any young person out there. Speaking up and using your voice when you do see things that are out of the ordinary, things that like even the jokes that some people may say, like, that's not funny, and that might not be funny to that person because it discriminates them or it racially profiles them. But the biggest thing would be using your voice to say what's wrong when it's wrong. Yeah, and I think that's all I really wanted to share. Mrs. Thompson, thank you for allowing me to have this opportunity. Thank you for everyone for listening. I'm willing to give Mrs. Thompson more resources and different things that you can check out if you are interested. I'm also open to talking and answering any questions that anyone has.
So does anyone have anything that they would like to ask Tande?
Like you said, when like you go into stores and stuff, people like act like really rudely, and they like think like you're gonna steal something or like take something just because of your color. Like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like mad, or like how do you feel when that happens?
So when that happens, I feel offended. I feel insulted because they've automatically assumed because I'm Black, I don't have money and I'm going to come into the store to steal something, when that's absolutely not the case. Like, my integrity is everything, especially in the job that I do. And I actually have to work parallel alongside police. So, my integrity outside of my uniform and inside my uniform is everything to me. So there's a lot of times you'll see where sometimes I'll see it actually happening, you'll see, and I'll hold out the item that I have just away from my body because I can see them just following me in the aisle or just watching me from the cash, and it's like being under a microscope. You know when there's an ant under a microscope and you're just following it, and then there's the hot sun? That's what it feels like. It's not a nice feeling. Anybody else have a question?
Dr. Mitzmacher, did you want to jump in quickly before we continue with the questions?
Yeah, I want to just, good morning, everybody. I want to layer something in and then give plenty of space for however many additional questions or comments or whatever people are moved to say and to share. I just want to start by saying that the bravest thing that you can ever do is to allow yourself to be vulnerable in public. It's one of the bravest acts that you can do, and we're getting a firsthand example of what that looks and feels like, and it's inspiring all different kinds of thoughts and feelings, and all of that is as it should be. I want to take a moment to name a couple things about how we, not just as human beings, but as Jewish people, have a viewpoint and a responsibility to engage in these kinds of matters. And I want to do it in two ways. I'm going to read a very short story. I'm going to try, technology permitting, to show you two very brief video clips. I'll come back on the other side with a very, very brief story. This whole thing will not take more than 3-4 minutes. And then I want to layer into a very particular idea. And I want you to keep in the back of your mind the list of practical suggestions that we've been given for those of us who are moved and inspired to want to do something as a response to what we're seeing and how it's making us think and feel. Okay? So I'm going to start with this very brief story. A rabbi and a soap maker once went for a walk together. The soap maker said to the rabbi, "What good is Judaism? After thousands of years of teaching about goodness, truth, justice, and peace, after all the study of Torah and all the fine ideals of the prophets, look at all the trouble and misery in the world. If Judaism is so wonderful and true, why should all this be so?" The rabbi said nothing. They continued walking until he noticed a child playing in the gutter. The child was filthy with soot and grime. "Look at that child," said the rabbi. "You say that soap makes people clean, but see the dirt on that youngster? What good is soap? With all the soap in the world, that child is still filthy. I wonder if soap is of any use at all." The soap maker protested and said, "But Rabbi, soap can't do any good unless it is used." "Exactly," cried the rabbi. "So it is with Judaism. It isn't effective unless it is applied in daily life and used." I'm going to introduce you to a fairly well-known historical figure from the 20th century. I'll say out loud, it's always important to name your biases and your background when you're trying to have a conversation like this. So I should remind you, if it's not front of Maughn, right? As someone who was born, raised, and educated in the States, you get a big chunk of this education, all of the examples that our guest named of injustices, and it goes for 400 years beyond what we're looking at right now, that you get that education because it is among the saddest parts of American history, and we have to understand it and learn it and figure out what to do about it. We also get some opportunity to understand how the Jewish community in the States engaged with the civil rights era in particular in the 1960s. And I want to introduce to you a very famous figure from that period of time. Again, this will be no more than 2 minutes, because he introduces a really powerful idea, and that's the idea that I want to lean into. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to pray that that works, and from a technological standpoint. I think our guest, it might be helpful if you muted yourself while I do this, because I think the echo is going to make it a little complicated. And for anyone else who's not muted, I'll ask you to mute yourself as well. And we'll see what happens.
And John, Dr. Mitzwacker, you should mute yourself too, because if you share it as a tab, then we won't hear it echo through your screen.
With pleasure.
Different backgrounds. My father from a Hasidic family in Warsaw, and Martin Luther King from a Baptist background in the American South. It's a very odd combination, and it's one of the American miracles. They had similar theological sensibilities. My father discovered a Christian who was making the Hebrew Bible the center of the American discussion. Amazing. And he was very moved by that. And the fact that my father wrote the book on the prophets also was very important. Andrew Young told me that everybody had a copy of that book on the prophets and carried it around in their pocket.
And of course, I know I did, and I've kept it on my desk ever since. Yeah, it's one of the books when I move, I know where that book is.
I have always seen him as a kind of intellectual father. And whenever I get a little down or depressed, I go get one of his books and I read the prophet Isaiah and what he has to say about Isaiah. Because Isaiah was written at a time of the desolation of Israel. And yet it's the loftiest vision of dreams for humankind. It's people's ability to have faith in the midst of persecution and destruction that Black Americans tapped into. And if you notice Martin Luther King's speeches, he quotes from the prophets more than almost anybody else. And he got a lot of those insights from his study of Rabbi Heschel.
King was impacted by Heschel's analysis of the prophets. Heschel made the conviction of the prophet that God is here in our immediate struggle, and that God's struggle is a struggle to help those who are voiceless to find voice, those who are blind to find sight, that it's in that unique dimension that God is most present.
Theologian and mystic Abraham Joshua Heschel. This weekend of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, religious services are planned around the country to remember him and his legacy. Some of them will be in synagogues that are honoring both King and the late Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of King's many courageous supporters. Heschel is widely considered to be one of the greatest American religious figures of the last century, a rabbi, theologian, social activist, and mystic, admired by Christians as well as Jews. He would have been 101 years old this month. Our segment was produced by Steve Brand, a New York filmmaker who is completing a documentary on Heschel called Praying with My Legs. Brand gathered powerful recollections from those who had known him and who wish his prophetic voice were still sounding.
Pick 'em up and lay 'em down, right.
It was his participation in the civil rights movement that first made Heschel widely known. In a famous photo of the Selma March in 1965, its leaders wearing garlands, Heschel was the white man with the prophet's beard, two to the right of Dr. King. That was the occasion on which Heschel said he felt he was praying with his legs.
God is either the father of all men or of no men. And the idea of judging a person in terms of black or brown or white is an eye disease.
I'll spare you the second story because I want to make sure I'm paying attention to time. The idea that I want to make sure you have front of mind is this notion of praying with our legs. I find it to be a very powerful idea, a way of understanding that one of the ways we can express ourselves Jewishly is not just through the words that we say, not just when we use a prayer book or a siddur and use our traditional words of prayer. That's a powerful thing to do also. But part of our expression as Jewish people and as human beings is also our responsibility to pray with our legs, to take action in the world, to, when we see injustice, to do something about it, to stand up, to be heard, to do what is right, to get involved, to be engaged, that those are expressions of our faith. Those are expressions of who we are. And so when we pivot back to, so what can we do? Right? What ought we do, even under these conditions, even in a time of social distancing, even when you're sitting mostly at home? What can we do? The question I would leave back to you would be, if you were motivated and inspired by these events to want to pray with your legs, what would that be?
Tandy had some technical difficulties, so she's trying to get back in. But I thank you, Dr. Mitzmacher, for making that connection for us, because I think that that's kind of the question that we've been talking about, of what can we do and why should we do, right? It's why should we be getting involved? Why should we be learning about this? Why should we be talking about it? And what can we do as 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 50-year-olds? What can we do?
While Mrs. Thompson is reconnecting, I will tell you that I've been having some version of this conversation with the grade 6s and with the grade 7s during our tefillah time, literally using the prayer space to think about what it might mean to pray with our legs. And we're also trying to generate some of these very practical lists and suggestions of how to take this energy, these feelings, and translate it into some next step that can make us not just feel like we're doing something, but actually take a step in helping move us in the right direction. And those things included anything from making sure that we are reading the newspaper or being on top of current events, that part of our responsibility is to know things, that we can't be an actor in the world if we're not aware of the world. And so, some of you may already be interested and engaged in current events. For some of you, perhaps it's not a priority, but that's an easy, simple starting point, is to be knowledgeable, to be interested, to be curious about what's happening in the world. Those of you who are a little bit more, want to go a little farther, you can be thinking about who in our local community are the people that you might want to engage with, either by writing a letter or an email, or thinking about, are there particular pieces of legislation around policing or around engaging with communities of color, and what might that look and feel like? You might be moved to reach out to some of the communities directly impacted by what we're seeing happening right now in the States. There are ways of connecting to schools and to children your age living in these different communities, so that you can learn more, and you can learn more about what it means to be an ally. And now that our guest has returned, I will do my best to stop talking and return the focus where it belongs.
So Mara, if you want to ask your question while Tandy is figuring out how to take herself off mute.
Yeah, so this isn't actually like my question. I was talking about this with my parents and my grandmother, and they had an interesting question. So Because, like, for the George Floyd thing, because you're a police officer or like a security guard, does it like change your way of thinking about it?
Very interesting question.
Does it change how I see myself as someone that enforces law? Is that what the?
No, it was like, do you think of it kind of, because I know a lot of Black people are like really mad. Like, does it change how you think of the whole situation? Because you have to enforce law, so it's.
So I feel very conflicted.
Oh, it was like, do you think of it kind of, because I know a lot of Black people are like really mad. Like, does it change how you think of the whole situation? Because you have to enforce law, so it's.
So I feel very conflicted. Do you know what conflicted means?
Yeah.
If I was in a uniform right now, I would feel very conflicted because being a part of the police force is a team, right? And you're supposed to have your team's back, and you're not supposed to have any sort of question on whether your other teammates have your back. And that I can say that some police officers probably feel that way right now, because how do you know someone that isn't a part of a left alt group isn't your partner? Because they're not going to reveal that until you're in a moment of need, and that's something that I never wanted to feel or put someone else in danger, or feel conflicted about because of who I am. Because I can't change my color, I can't change my skin, and I don't want to be put into that sort of a position. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? You can put it in the chat. I know some comments, Candy, of just, I know you answered some of them. I don't know which ones came in while you were frozen or not, but just
Gonna check.
just thankful for you being so brave to share with us, and that they're finding you inspirational, and I definitely am too. Yossi has one more question. You don't have to be sorry, Yossi. That was the point of this, that we want to answer the questions that you have.
Okay, like, have you ever, like, have you ever seen someone being racist to someone else? And if you have, like, have you ever done anything about it? Like,
yes, I've experienced racism being with some of my Jewish friends. It's not a nice experience, and I always speak up because I've always spoken up because that's what I've been taught. Growing up, I can tell you that other children that are Black have been told that, you're going to have to work twice as hard. You're going to have to work twice as hard at work, twice as hard at school, because your skin is going to hold you back. And because I was told that and processed it a different way, I was like, this is wrong. And so whenever I do see injustice, whether it's for someone that's Black or any other color, I always call it out. I'll call that person out. And then being in a position where I'm in security and became authority and saw that I had authority, and I said, I'm not going to abuse my authority. I'm going to use my authority for good. So just me having that personality and having the job that I do, whether I'm in uniform or out of uniform, I'm always going to call someone out when they're doing something wrong.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I can add to Tandy's response and let you know that knowing her when she responds and calls people out, it is always done in such a way. I'm struggling even to describe it. It's kind of like what you were saying before, Tandy, from a place of being calm, of a place, even though the feelings inside may be anger and frustration, and they may be building well beyond. I feel that you are, the way that you've been speaking to us, even when you got emotional, that kind of trying to keep your cool, because your message is so much stronger when it comes out from that place. Joey, you had a question.
Yeah, so like when people were being racist towards you, was that like when you were on vacation, or has that happened in Toronto or Canada?
I've experienced racism right here at home. First time when I was in grade 4, and there's a bunch of other times as I've grown older. It always catches you off guard because this is where I was born and raised, and you're kind of like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You know, you're just like, you just say what I think you just said?
Yeah.
Right? And we're in one of the greatest places on the planet right now, hands down. And you don't expect it, but you know, it's here. But like I said, it's taught, and if we can teach the next generation that, you know, this particular thing is wrong, and show different ways of how we can unify, then, you know, that's a step in the right direction for progress. Because Canada, I can say, is not guilty, not innocent in its own history of discriminating different races. But I will say that, you know, being in Toronto, and becoming so multicultural in the immigration, they've started to take steps in the right direction.
Yeah, and so what can we do to help?
So what you could do to help is you can learn more. You have the opportunity to be you have Google. When I was growing up, I didn't have Google. So you can type in any sort of question that you might have, and you can go into Google. You also have myself as a resource. You have Ms. Thompson and other teachers around you as resources. But reading books are a really big way to change your worldview. Making friends that are in different cultures can change your worldview. There's a quote that says you should hang around with people that have different worldviews, because if you just have one worldview and you're just looking through your telescope, you have no idea what's going on around you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's better to know and have that awareness socially, and also in other awarenesses, physically, mentally. But just having that awareness of the people around you and who you live with is good.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jackson.
I have black sisters. My stepsisters are black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you learn a lot from them?
Well, they're younger than me, but I have a stepmom that's black. I have 2 stepmoms that are black. So, yeah, like sometimes they play Jamaican music.
Do you like Jamaican music?
I don't really understand it, but yeah.
As you grow older and you're more exposed to it, you will.
A lot of my favorite rappers are black people. Well, yeah. And basketball players. Yeah.
Who's your favorite basketball player?
Well, in the NBA, probably Kobe or Michael Jordan. Or AI.
All right. Okay. Ooh, look at that old school Allen Iverson.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice hat.
Thanks.
Thanks for sharing, Jackson.
All right. Are there any other questions before we set everyone free and thank Tande for this incredible
Oh, we have
experience?
Karen.
Oh, did I miss a question? Oh, sorry, Karen. Yes.
Sasha too. Oh,
Oh, sorry. I missed all of that. Karen, go ahead.
oh,
Do you have a foundation of forgiveness even towards racist humans? Is that what we all need to learn?
do I have a foundation? Oh,
Of forgiveness. Like, so do you feel that when you did say that earlier on, actually, about when you recognize that somebody who may be acting in a particular way, it may be coming from a place of ignorance, a place of misinformation, not being educated, and you do have some.
yes, I can definitely say I've lived a lot of life experiences, and through those life experiences, it's like something external. Now it's like, okay, I got to understand that I had to do my own internal healing to be able to um, be even have this sort of a vision towards other people. Uh, childhood experiences have to heal from that to be able to come and be able to be the adult I am today. Because I can tell you that if I didn't do that healing, I'd probably be just as angry as America right now. I
That
did
makes a lot
speak
of
up,
sense.
right? I did speak up and use my social platform, but for the past several days, I really haven't spoken to anyone on the phone because I need time to process that. I need time to see what my actual thoughts are and allow the anger to work through those feelings of the anger because that is the initial first feeling. But that's not where I want to operate from. I want to operate from a place of love, and I want to be able to educate instead of um, spew more hate because that's the cycle. I'm into really breaking cycles, and this is a cycle that it's gone on for too long. And if I can help in some way to be positive, have that message given, and I'm going to be the beacon or the vessel that's used, then I'm going to be that.
That's a good way. It's a good way to frame it to break the cycle, because I think about forgiveness and I don't know how I can do that. If I think about what happened to George Floyd, I have no place in my heart for forgiveness, and yet exactly that, the cycle has to break. It's a great way to frame it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sasha, you had a question?
I have two, actually. So if, would you ever want, I mean, some people would think of this differently. I don't know because I don't have color. I'm white, so I don't really know. And this is kind of a question that everyone's different about. Would you want someone I don't know if this, would you want someone to in terms of, would you actually that's a stupid question here. Wait, can you come back?
No question is, Sasha, no question is stupid. Do you find your words and ask me your question?
Okay. Have you ever, here, this is my second one. My first one doesn't really make sense. Have you ever considered yourself a bit less because of color? Or do you take it as a thing of, I'm special, it's I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. It's definitely a great thing because everyone's equal. But have you ever been upset because of what you are?
I have not been upset because of what I am, but I can tell you that there are other people who are upset. I can tell you okay, so here's some ways that I can show you that let's call it I don't want to call it brainwashing. But I guess essentially that's what it is. There's things in society where it puts down having darker skin. So growing up and having the complex of seeing that, you know, having lighter skin or having straight hair, because my hair is different. It's right now it's in dreads and it's in a nice thing, but my hair is not like your hair. My hair is a lot harder to deal with, right? So society doesn't promote having my course of hair as seeing it as neat or being professional. So there's a lot of people that are my color that try to, I'm sure you know what a perm is. So a perm for you would be curly, but a perm for someone that's black is straightening your hair to make it more so look like your hair. And I'm not saying there's not anything wrong with that. If you can't deal with your hair and you need something else to deal with, I think that's okay. But where the idea came from is because your skin color is not going to get you anywhere. Right? So that's why I was saying earlier to Yossi, a lot of black kids are grown up. I can tell you pretty much everyone that I know, you're gonna have to work twice as hard because of your skin color. That's what you're told. Like, even my brothers, you're gonna have to work twice as hard. You're gonna have to do twice as hard in school. You're gonna have to go the extra mile because they're gonna hold you back. Right? And yes, I took in those words what my mom said, but then I was like, okay, but there's no solution. That was her warning me and protecting me, but then I had to find a way to change that narrative because that's not something I want to tell my kids. And here's something I didn't actually tell you is that my partner is white. My significant other is a white man. So now if we decide to have children, we're going to have children that are half black and half white. So I don't want to have to tell my child, hey, you're going to have to work twice as hard because you have some black in you. That's not something that I want to continue. And I was telling your French teacher, I want to break that cycle. Did I answer your question, Sasha?
Joey, you think you have a weird question?
It's not really weird. It's just like, it might be kind of obvious, but I just don't know. But like, so where did like because I know it didn't just start this week. So where did it like all this like racism start? Like, did like just when someone was born, they're like, black people are different?
So racism started back when European colonialists, they went to different parts of Africa and decided they saw minerals and spices and different things and said, hey, we're going to take these people because they thought they were uncivilized. Let's say that's the word. So because of the rituals they already had and on their continent, in their view, they were uncivilized when they actually already had thriving civilizations. So yes, they took them and then they brought them to various parts of the United States, various parts of the Caribbean, various parts of South America. You'll see some Cubans who are darker skinned. You'll see there's a lot of Hispanic, Latin people who are darker skinned. And yeah, a lot of them a lot of that culture is stemming from the continent of Africa. And that's how that started, Joey. And then because it went on for a series of 400 plus years into modern day, they abolished it, but then they decided to, they're like, okay, you guys, you're out of slavery, but now you're going to be lower than low. You're not going to have a place in the rank of human. Does that make sense? Like, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
You're welcome.
And it kind of relates to what we were talking about this morning, Joey, just in terms of the system, right? Systemic racism. What does that mean, and how does that happen? And how historical events end up becoming part of history, and every generation is impacted by the generation before it. And that's why that image of that cycle, just as Tande had said, we need to break that cycle somehow. It's not something that's going to be a quick fix, and it's not something that's going to be easy. And I think that the fact that we are having this conversation is one of those steps in helping to break that cycle. And I'm so proud of all of you for listening and being here and asking your questions, because I think also, myself included, all the adults here, asking questions is the way that we learn more. And it's the way that we make changes. It's how we try to better understand. Knowledge is power.
Yes.
And so if there was, I know we've talked about, reading books and opening our eyes to different cultures. Dr. Mitzmacher had asked a question. He had to leave, unfortunately, but there was kind of that one last question. I'm going to scroll up to just see. But as students in grade 5, if there was a way for them to demonstrate as allies, is there anything else that we haven't already said? Is there anything else that you would recommend? Even, guys, even in terms of understanding our own stereotypes and understanding our own biases that we may not necessarily even realize we have. But Tande, I don't know if you have any last advice of how we can show our allyship.
Your allyship would be researching Black-owned businesses, and just seeing some of the products that they offer that might resonate with you. Some. I was saying, like, Indigo is, like, I'm a big reader, and Indigo is one of my favorite places. But sometimes when I'm looking for a specific topic, that book is not in Indigo. I got to go to a store that has the right book that I can look for it, and it's not Black owned, and that's something I can say that really bothers me. It's like, why aren't all the authors in one place, or why aren't all the authors offered in various places from various companies? But I would say research Black-owned businesses, and if you guys do fundraising or for any sort of cause, research a charity that you could donate to, maybe children's after-school programs or something of the sort, just to aid them along, because they might not get the same resources or funding that's offered to others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have given us so much today. Every time you say something, I'm brought back to something else you said. I'm like, oh yeah, and that, and it's just, I hope that all of you will continue to think about it and think about your questions. And I know that Tande will be open to answering anything else that may come up. We can continue to keep in touch with her. And there, she's answered that question for you. Nam, I think that was your question. Thank you, Tande. You've given us so much of your time. Oh my goodness. And so much knowledge, so much to think about, so much to consider. And I can't say it enough. I've already said it 1,000 times since I asked you, and I'll continue to say it, but thank you.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for taking the time to do this, because this is another way of change, is showing the next generation that we can come together, that this shouldn't be an issue for this long in modern day. So I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate you taking me out of my comfort zone. Even though, like, because this whole issue, I was just very recluse, and this was another form of therapy for me. So thank you for listening.